Hi there. A friend of mine asked me how I did beadwork and if I could show her how, and I'm going to do that today. This is an old loom that I've had for probably 30 years or more. It's a piece of wood, and I've nailed an additional piece down on both ends. I glued them and nailed, but you can also screw them into place. They're sticking up. You can see that right there. And on the end, there's a nail about 1/4 of an inch down in the middle. And the other end has another nail in it. I've taken a blade, like a utility knife blade, and I've actually made some little cuts along the edge here, about the width of a bead, all the way along the edge on both ends. So this end has it too. And these are spaced about a bead width apart. I just took the knife blade and pushed down hard to make a slit in the wood, but not a groove. Now I'm taking my bead thread, and this is a cone of thread. That's what they call a cone. This is a size D as in dog. And I've got some needles here. And these needles are special bead needles, and they're size 12s. They're very fine, very tiny, and they'll go through most of the 12s, 11s, and of course 10s. Beads are numbered, and the larger the number, the smaller the bead. So, for example, 12 would mean 12 beads per inch. And of course, if you had a 13 beads per inch, they would have to be smaller. And it's like numbering wire. So the larger the number, the larger the bead, and the smaller the number, the smaller the bead. So the first thing I'm going to do now is tie the end of my thread, my bead thread. Regular thread doesn't work very well. It doesn't last long. And bead thread is much better. And I'm going to tie a knot. I'm going around the nail here so I can get a hold of it. And I'm tying that knot a couple of times so it doesn't go anywhere. And I am going to start my first thread in a slot that I've made with a knife that's closest to the nail. And I'm going to bring that thread down and down and down to the other nail. And I'm going to go into a slot there next to the nail. There's some old threads in here. Let me get those out of the way. Okay, so I'm taking the slot next to the nail, and then I'm going to go around the nail. And I have the tension fairly firm on here. I don't want it to be floppy or soggy. And now I'm going to take my thread and go into the next slot right here, next to that thread, and move all the way down to this nail again, and into a slot and around the nail, and back into another slot, the next one available. Remember, these are all cut about the width of your bead, so you can see the spacing on the string is staying really nice. It's going to be perfect for putting your beads in place when we get to that part. Now I'm going into the next slot. I've gone around the nail into the next slot, and this is 4 strings now. Oops, one of my strings popped out of its slot. Let me get it back in. That happens sometimes. Okay, so now I'm on to number 4, going into a slot, going around the nail, going into the next slot. That one string keeps popping out. Okay. I'll fix it in a minute. I'm going to do this 10 times. I'm going to get 10 warp threads. These are called warp threads, W-A-R-P. The beads are going to be held on the warp thread with the sewing a new piece of bead thread. and that is called the weft. W-E-F-T. And we're going down to the next slot. I've kind of lost count. I know I don't have 10 yet. It'd be a little wider than this. Okay, still going. The reason I'm doing an even number of warp strings is that the beads are going to go between each string. So if you have 10 warp strings, you'll have 9 beads. You'll always have 1 bead less, and you want the beads to be an odd number. So when you do your design or your pattern, you'll have a central bead. If you want to come up to a point, there'll be a point in, and you'll be able to create that if you have an odd number of beads. But if you have odd strings, you'll have even beads and you won't be able to make a point. All right, where am I? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. No, I've gone too far, I'm 11. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. So we don't need this one. And of course I should have known that because this is my starting side here, and you always begin and end on the same side. So I'm going to go ahead and tie that off, and don't do what I do. You should use scissors, not your teeth. But you know, this is what I have at the moment because my scissors are across the room and I can't let go of the threads. Anyway, now I'm tying this really good because I sure don't want that to come undone in the middle of our project here. Now I have the 10 warp strings, starting with one nail, back and forth, and ending with the same nail. And so I'm going to get another piece of thread, and I'm going to thread my needle. And this is tricky. Good eyes are certainly helpful. Definitely good light is useful. And then there's some other tricks. So I'm going to stop this right now and go get my other tool, and I'll be right back. Okay, I've brought my beads in. These are vials of beads. Sometimes you can buy them threaded. They're on hanks. They look like regular string, and the beads are, well, they're easier to use that way, but the vials are okay too. These are number 11s. I thought they might be easier for you to see since they're a bit larger. I've got my bead string here, and I'm going to cut it with a knife rather than a pair of scissors, and this is my little secret. I found that if I cut it at an angle, it creates a point on the string and makes it easier to thread. And then I'll take my number 12 needle, and instead of threading like you would normally hold the needle and put the thread into the needle, that's the way people usually do it. For bead thread, it's easier if you hold the thread and then feed the needle into it. And if you can find that little point, you can see that it goes fairly easy. So I have that threaded, and I'm going to tie it onto the warp string closest to me. So here's all my warp strings, all 10 of them, and I'm going to take the one nearest to me and put the thread in between it and its next string, and I'm going to tie a knot. Whoops, let me try that again. I lost it. Give myself a little more string there to work with. 1 and 2. All right. Now this little tail sticking out here is going to go away as I bead a row. Each time I bead a row, this is going to lay down and get tucked into the next row, and I'll show you how I do that in a minute. I've got all my colors out. My pattern this is just some lined notebook paper, and I drew with a black pen. I drew a line between the regular lined note paper, and I ended up with my 10. I did a bit of a drawing of what the end of the loom looks like. There's the nail. This is the threads wrapping around it and coming up to each one of their slots, and I didn't draw the other end. My pattern is 9 beads, and I have 4 colors in my pattern. Now I don't have to make my pattern the right colors, but I'm pretty close with this one, with these colors. So I'm going to start with row 1. I've got my thread tied on, and row 1, we just don't look at the other rows. I find sometimes this is helpful, maybe a piece of paper or something, and just block off everything else so you're only looking at row 1. And row 1 is 2 of one color, 2 of another color, and then a repeat of this one, and etc. So I think starting out, I'm going to do 2 of these pink colors, 2 of the creamy colors. I don't know what those are called. Some kind of pretty iridescent bead. And then the next is 1 back to the one I started with. And then it pattern says do 2 of these again. If you stick with the pattern you developed, you'll be pretty safe. And the last 2. So I have the beads in the pattern. You can see how big the pattern is, and the beads are so small. But the first row is always the most challenging. You've got to get each bead in its slot. And once you get them in, all the next rows go much easier. So I've got 2 beads in place, 3 beads in place. I'm trying to get a string between each one. I'm going to take that off the needle. The needle is giving me some trouble here. So I'm sliding them down. I'm trying to keep my hand out of the way so you can see what I'm doing. I'm going to get this into the first 2, and then I'm going to kind of try and coax in the next 2. They're getting there. Sometimes you can use your needle to help you lift a thread in place. I lost the first 2. Be patient. This is the hardest one. After that, they go much smoother. See, all right, I've got them all lined up in there. Now this is important. The thread, the warp thread went the weft thread went under the warp. Now I'm going to put the needle through the beads, but I have to be sure that I see the sparkle of the needle as I go, because the needle is going to go on top of the warp beads. So that locks these beads in place on the loom. You can see, well, I can see, I don't know if you can see, but there's a little sparkle of shiny metal between each bead. So I know the needle is on top of the warp strings. And I'm going to drag that on through nice and slow and easy, because when you go fast you tend to get knots, and then that's very frustrating. Now I'm going to gently tug that into place, and now you can see how the warp strings are all behaving much better. Okay, so we're on to row number 2. And row number 2 says I need 1 of the pink ones, 2 of the cream ones, 1 pink, 1 turquoise, 1 pink, 2 creams, and 1 pink. So this is the pattern: 1 pink, 2 cream, a pink, a turquoise, a pink, 2 creams, and a pink. Okay, now this one is going to be a lot simpler because now we have the right spacing. The first row got that straightened out. I'm also kind of paying attention to that little tail there. I want it to start catching and going in. We'll get it on the next one. Okay, so I'm pushing those up. They went underneath. The string here went underneath, and I'm pushing them up into place. Really push on it hard so they get up tight. And now I'm going to put the needle through on the top of the warp. You want to make sure the needle is shiny and showing and that you see it in each spacing. I see it. They're all sparkling. So you asked me, I'm just sure I heard somebody asking me that, what happens if the needle goes under the warp as you're doing this top row? Well, the bead won't stay firm. It'll sort of hang down, and you'll see the little warp string on top. They won't fall off, but they just won't have the right look to them of being in the center of the warp strings. They'll hang a little below. Okay, so I'm on to number 3. I'm kind of anxious to see my design. I see a little bit of it starting. It says I need 2 creams, a pink, a turquoise. We're picking up this darker burgundy color here. Back to a turquoise, and a pink, and finally 2 creams. So once you have your pattern drawn out in this grid, you don't have to think about it anymore. You just follow your plan. I like to make up my own designs. They're fairly simple. They're geometric, but you can actually make letters. I mean, you can make ABC and put somebody's name in here. Okay, I'm checking, double checking. I see a shiny needle on the top. Nobody's gonna hang down on this one. And now I am, you notice each time I come around, I'm catching that little tail. So the little tail is gonna just disappear eventually into the beadwork, and it's gonna be part of the warp strings just laying beside them. All right, next row. 1 cream, 1 pink, 2 turquoise. It's starting to get interesting, isn't it? See the little point on the design there? 2 turquoise, 1 of these burgundy, 2 turquoise, a pink, and a cream. All right, underneath the warp, push them up into place, push firmly so that they don't sag down. Run the needle through and make sure the needle is on top of the warp strings. All right, I'm double checking. Looks good. I'm gonna pull it through nice and gentle, and you can start to see the design forming. It's really gonna be neat. Okay, here's my central design. So we're on the pink, turquoise, and 5 of these burgundies. A turquoise and a pink. All right. So I'm making this pretty design, and what could I do with this? One of the things you could use this for is to make a hat band. Measure out the circumference around your hat and mark off where you want to go. And if you find the center, you might want to do some different design in the center and have these be the edges going around. At the end, you would cut off back by the nail and start tying these strings together. Tie this one to that one to that one, all the way around, and then tuck them under. And I like to take a piece of soft leather, chamois or something like that, cut a strip the same width as the beads, and stitch the beads onto the leather using catching the warp string on the edge and stitching into the leather. So when you were done, you would have extra leather that you could tie the back and tie it onto your hat. So this is kind of a simple design. It would be something simple to make. There's lots of fun things you can do with beadwork, and I just wanted to show you the basics of how to loom. And that is how you do it, and you just keep going one after another. So I'll do some more here and then maybe speed the video up so you can see it faster. All right, now I have some thread, quite a bit. I could go quite a bit further, but one of the things I did want to show you is that you will not be able to stretch out enough thread to make your entire project. At some point, you're going to run out of thread, and you're going to need to add some more thread to start again. So this is how I end a project. Let's say I'm getting kind of towards maybe that much left. I go back with the needle, back through the rows, several times. I'll do about 3 rows back. And instead of going down to the very end, I'm actually just going to cut this off right inside a bead. Okay, now to start again, Let me show you the threading of the needle, because I noticed on the other part of the video you didn't really get to see that real well. So I'm going to thread a new one, and I have my knife, and I'm just going to cut that angle so that it'll be easy to thread. I'm cutting the thread, not the knife. I'm cutting the thread at an angle, and that creates the point. And then, so I'm holding onto the thread, and I pushed the thread through the eye of the needle, and I'm just continuing pulling it through, and now I've rethreaded my needle. I don't need to put a knot on the other end. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start back in a back row, maybe one more row back from where I was. Let's see, I'm going to go in and out and in. And I want to have the thread come out where I was. My habit is it being down here, so if you change the habit, it makes it more difficult to keep your pattern. So it looks like 3 rows back will do it, and I'm going to pull that thread until it's inside a bead, not sticking out anymore, and I'll go back through another row and pull on it, and then back through the last row. And now you see my thread is coming out as it was before. Don't pull real hard, because you could possibly pull it all out. It'll lock as you add your beads. It's not going to go anywhere. But right now it's a little delicate. It's possible to pull it out. So then I'm going to go ahead and do the next row and continue on from there and continue tucking this little tail in. And that is the loom project. There's many other ways to handle beads and do all kinds of different beaded projects. The loom is the most basic. I learned to loom when I was 8 years old at the San Carlos Apache Reservation, when my friend was learning beadwork and her mom was teaching her, and we did a lot of hanging out together, her at my house and me at hers, and so I learned beadwork there at 8. We used to make little beaded necklaces together. Okay, that's it. Enjoy your beadwork. Bye-bye.